Act 2 is an interesting one because some editions break it into 4 scenes while others divide it into 2. We'll be dealing with the 4-scene variety to help break down and analyse the foreshadowing and development of motifs. Remember to make note of these as we go so that you can go back and practice your analysis as you revise. Act 2, Scene 1 opens with a conversation between Edmund and his acquaintance Curin. During this conversation, the rumour that there is likely wars toward twixt the two Dukes of Cornwall and Albany is introduced, as is the information that Regan and Cornwall plan to come and stay with and ostensibly occupy Gloucester's house. Then, in a short soliloquy, Edmund reveals that all of these actions play perfectly into his own plans. Here, audiences see the repetition of the concepts of truth, deception, and appearance and reality. Remember that throughout the whole play, Shakespeare continues to use Edmund's soliloquies to repeatedly highlight the blindness of other characters, and the dramatic irony in the structure helps us to see and analyse these concepts that are related. Go back over the soliloquy with a fine-tooth comb and look for the diction and motif of seeing and blindness to add these to your notes. Interestingly, in Edmund's words and Curin's information, there is a similarity, but not quite a repetition, of Kent's early observation from Act 1, Scene 1, that I thought the king had more affected the Duke of Albany than Cornwall. While the obvious takeaway from the opening scene of Act 2 is that we understand Edmund will use the rumours to his advantage, a more subtle takeaway is that we can see that Kent's understanding and clarity of perception is reinforced again, highlighting the importance of Kent's insight and demonstrating his goodness. So, back to Act 2, Scene 1. As the scene continues, audiences understand that Edmund is still spreading lies about his brother Edgar, but Edgar still blindly believes his younger brother is trying to help him. Edmund now stages a fight with Edgar supposedly to help the situation, and then tells Edgar to fly. The younger illegitimate son wounds himself to make the fight look convincing, and then tells his father, Gloucester, that Edgar hurt him and is plotting to kill Gloucester. Gloucester believes Edmund. In this short interaction between the characters of the parallel plot, Shakespeare ultimately positions audiences to criticise Gloucester's lack of insight or desire to question further. After the fight between the brothers and Edgar's flight, it is revealed Regan and Cornwall have indeed left their home and travelled to see Gloucester. The couple willingly believe Edmund's lies about Edgar as well, because it plays perfectly into their own plans. Tellingly, Regan asks, "What, did my father's godson seek your life? He whom my father named, your Edgar?" The repetition of my father, coupled with acts of blame, certainly indicates her untoward and underhanded actions, as she aims to connect Edgar's supposedly evil act with the king, thus distancing herself from her own father and implying his unfitness to be king. Something Jacobean audiences would, again, have seen as unnatural and therefore condemned. Regan also asks if Edgar is one of the disorderly knights that attend Lear. Edmund replies that he is, and Regan speculates further that these knights put Edgar up to the idea of killing Gloucester in order to acquire Gloucester's wealth. The dramatic irony apparent here only invites audiences to criticise the underhanded and unnatural actions of these two characters. Regan then asks Gloucester for his advice in answering letters from Goneril that supposedly warn against Lear's knights coming to stay with her, and she does so with nefarious intent. Audiences know this is not the case, and this moment marks the formation of the evil triumvirate of Regan, Cornwall and Edmund, as their conspiracies against their family members come together. The ease with which they are able to lie and manipulate explicitly and implicitly dictated through Shakespeare's specific word choices within the act reinforces again that this world is upside down and that goodness has gone by this point in the play. An additional activity for you here is to make connections to the ways that Shakespeare draws on traditional Jacobean understandings of natural order and the specific language choices, including metaphors and motifs that act to demonstrate Shakespeare's criticism. As the act moves on, outside Gloucester's castle, Oswald and Kent meet. Kent immediately recognises Oswald and attacks him again for his lack of respect towards Lear, calling him a knave, a rascal, an eater of broken meats, and adding many more specific insults. As an audience, the humour invites us to take up Kent's position, especially as we know Oswald to be many of the things Kent says he is, allowing audiences to further criticise Oswald's deteriorating morality and his increase in sycophantic behaviour as the play goes on. Importantly, the direct contrast between Oswald's version of loyalty and Kent's is made apparent through Kent's speech when he says that such a slave as this should wear a sword who wears no honesty, Such smiling rogues as these, like rats, oft bite the holy cords atwain, which are too in trins to unloose, smooth every passion that in the natures of their lords rebel. While Shakespeare's inclusion of Kent's hot-headed insult and his ultimate confinement to the stocks in this scene might invite some audiences to criticise Kent for being loyal to a fault, the fault here of course being the way he brings harm and humiliation to his own person, a closer look shows that this speech instead invites audiences to praise Kent's loyalty. Shakespeare does this most obviously through the use of contrasts. Obviously, the negative descriptors of Oswald as being or being associated with a slave, rogues, rats and dogs indicate that those who are false, lack substance, purposely mislead or lack their own direction, are not truly loyal or to be trusted, and are equivalent to vermin. Also, the insult and criticism in the line, smooth every passion that in the natures of their lords rebel, remind us of Kent's bold but ultimately rightful defiance of Lear when the king was too blind. Shakespeare uses the plot structure now that Goneril's betrayal has come to pass, to further show Kent's insight from the opening of the play and to demonstrate that Kent's moral objection to Lear's cruel and rash actions was correct. Shakespeare also draws on Jacobean religious values by using the imagery of a rat biting the holy cords atwain. As his original audience were living through the Black Plague, spread by rats, and through the general repulsion that most feel towards rats, Shakespeare's imagery is effective in communicating a repulsion towards those who are disloyal or false. Adding again to this repulsion is the imagery and metaphor of the holy cords being damaged. The holy cords are representative of the bonds of fealty, family, and loyalty to higher power. These cords that held society together being bitten suggests an entirely unnatural and unsavoury act, especially as Kent points out that they should be too in trins to unloose. Violent, unnatural imagery therefore invites audiences to see that chaos has descended on this kingdom and that natural order is now so lost that one of the lowest things on the great chain of being, animals or servants, can undo the whole system. The imagery of sickness in rats, plague and epileptic visage also reinforce that this country has been infected by disloyalty, and we can make some direct links to the state of the kingdom being a result of the king prematurely giving up his sovereign authority. There's also plenty of discussion about the concept of truth and the difference between flattery and honesty in this scene, as Cornwall, who is already characterised as conniving and power-hungry like his wife, says that Kent's bluntness is just as sneaky as someone who flatters. This section certainly sets the scene for Shakespeare's representation of the differences between truth and action and the emptiness of speech. By the end of the scene, Regan and Cornwall have Kent put in the stocks for his behaviour. This plot point is an important and symbolic act because, as a representative of the king and the king's messenger, putting Kent in the stocks is equivalent to putting Lear himself in the stocks. Gloucester announces as much when he protests, "Your purposed low correction is such as basest wretches are punished with." Audiences see that Regan, however, ignores his pleas. She almost seems to welcome the idea of inviting Lear's anger. The imagery and the metaphorical belittling of Lear is apparent for both modern and Shakespearean audiences. The final moments of this scene leave Kent alone on stage, and he reveals that he has been receiving secret correspondence from Cordelia, who intends to come back to save her father.